Do-do-do. Oh, hello there! Can't believe I'm wearing a size large shirt. I walk about 2.5 miles every day. I still dream of a plate of spaghetti. Really good pasta, which I haven't had in a long time, but I know I shouldn't eat stuff like that. I never ate much pasta, but I'm down to 193 pounds. I need to lose at least another 20 pounds, like somewhere 170, 175, but it doesn't matter how much weight you lose. You really can't polish a poo, as the saying goes, right? That someone said, and it's accurate, you could roll it in glitter. You can't polish it, but you could roll it in glitter. This is actually an incredibly important subject, and I was going to actually get into making my own holograms back in the day, and I have a link to the article below. If you take out the pictures, and you stick it in a normal 12-point font, it's really only like 3 pages long. I love being able to take, because nobody's got time for that, being able to take an entire book's worth of information, because I can't stand reading a book and you got to go 20 pages before you find a tiny acorn of like, wow, that's important, that makes sense, you know, that aha moment. You'll read 20, 30, sometimes more pages just to find a little nugget of valuable stuff that will stick with you for the rest of your life. I can't stand reading books like that. So I got a whole book's worth of information, and the only way you could do that is if you know what you're talking about and you make it really simple, but you got to read it slowly, but it's still only 3 pages. I have that link below. It's on my Substack. By the way, if you like the free articles that I write for you, any donations always greatly and very warmly welcome, and I really appreciate that. I know everybody's struggling right now, and so am I. And it's an important subject, and it's about holographic self-similarity or fractal self-similarity, ultimately both of which are tied into one another. And this actually is an incredibly important subject. Everything that is holographic in the universe, which is way more than you think, and I was going to get into making true art holograms back in the day. It requires an enormous amount, even though the setup is really simple, enormous amount of obnoxious, super heavy table, and you kind of actually have to wait 20 minutes for, the air disturbances just from talking or moving to calm down. Just the slightest little bump that you think is nothing like that just makes a huge difference. So it's very, very, very precise, and I'm a very precise sort of person, but it ended up not being worth it, so I didn't get into holography, but I have true art holograms. They're absolutely amazing. But this isn't about holograms, this is about the universe. Regular light holography, magnetism, of course, is holographic. I've showed you countless examples of the magnetic field underneath the supercell, and it's about a bifurcated singularity, which sounds complex, but two things which are one. Now, this is called a golden caliper. It's just a simple piece of plastic with some rivets in it, and it's joined right down here, right? It's basically two arms with a bifurcated setup at a ratio. It doesn't matter where I put this. This is 1 and this is phi. If I bring it here, this is still 1. If I make this distance 1, this is always phi. The golden ratio. People love to say golden ratio, and they love to say a sacred geometry, which is descriptively accurate, but it doesn't explain anything. It doesn't explain anything. The beauty and the harmony of nature, the bifurcation of the two things that are one. And obviously this is 1, but I actually have a set-up division here. It's the projective geometry of that which is most simple and everything that's beautiful in nature. I mean, this is projective geometry. They call this a toroidal slinky or a toroflux principle. Yeah, right here where nothing is, you see there's nothing there, and this is the torus, or the magnetic field, the projective geometry. Now these two things, of course, are one. But without this, there's nothing here. There's nothing to see here. We can see the ring, but we have to pretend that that's invisible. Here we can actually see something, acknowledge beauty, and acknowledge something is manifest. So explaining that is impossible for basically anybody. They don't know what they're talking about. Magnetism. explain to you why everybody loves talking about dreams. Well, what's the how and the why of the incredible holography in dreams? Well, it's really simple. Simplicity is divinity. Projective geometry and bifurcation of one thing is two. Yeah, like principle and attribute. Like the first two digits of the Fibonacci sequence are 1 and 1. It's not 1, 1 and another 1 over here. It's one thing that are bifurcated. A singular thing that's true. That's two. But they're actually not two. They're unified, just as this is unified at its apex. Same thing from the I Ching, which is the idea of yin and yang. The magnetic and the dielectric are not two different things. But if I were a scientist and academician, they are two things. Like, no, they're not. Magnetism is a dielectric field. Dreams, fractals, true art holograms, mental objects, the image of the magnetic and dielectric field underneath the supercell, the water molecule itself, which is not only bifurcated perfect fractal self-similarity, which sounds complicated, but which it's not, but it's also, too, the only perfect incommensurable geometry in the universe. I have an article about the interesting facts of the water molecule in the description, but this article on cosmic holography is in the link below. I hope you appreciate the article. It's on my Substack. This is fractal self-similarity, which means phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. Now, if you tell that to a mathematician, and I've talked with other people about this, they'll say, well, yeah, that's true. Well, what's the point? And it's right before their noses, but they don't see what the point of that is. Now, the fractal and the bifurcated self-similarity, the one is Discovery of Mind, found in Plato's Republic 509D. To 511 is divided line section, where you actually take a singular line and you divide it. I can't stand chalk dust, but I got my chalk right here. You take a simple line like this. There you go, and you divide it unevenly, and you divide each one of those sections unevenly. You end up with phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi, which is phi cubed, which equals 1 over phi to the power of negative 3. Well, 1 over phi to the power of negative 3 is the bifurcated one as against the self. And this is the cornerstone and crux of emanationism. Emanationism is diametrically opposed to creationism and is diametrically opposed to atomism / materialism. It's a complete opposite. It kind of sits between both. A little bit of one, a little bit of the other, but neither of those ones. All projective geometry, of course, is a conjugate. The one and the one, light and illumination, true art holograms, the magnetic field, whose base, of course, is the dielectric. There is no way to remove one half from another half of any projective conjugate pair. They're not two things. So, well, a magnet has poles. You can take this magnet here. You got a north pole over here and a south pole over there. Well, conventionally that's true, but ultimately it's not true, because I don't know if you know this or not. If you cut a magnet in half, you'll just end up with two new magnets. There's not, a north pole here and a south pole over there. It's not there. This is the secret, by the way, of incommensurability. And Pythagoras said it was the only secret of the Pythagoreans. The only true secret of the Pythagoreans. Everything else is open for people to know. And of course, it's not a real secret. The only secret or block is in people's brains to comprehend things. That's the only true secret of the countless things that are called secrets in our world. Magnetic field is based on it. There's not one without the other. There's no such thing as a monopole, which is ridiculous. To even say monopole is ridiculous. A pole, by definition, is something that has two ends. It's like, well, here's a monopole. It's like, no, you're just covering up the other half of the pole with your hand. No, there's a monopole right there. It's only got one pole. Mental objects, holography, and this realism in dreams are only the constructive, destructive mirages between the nous and that of consciousness by means of water. That's that incommensurable geometry I was talking about, which is the water molecule. You actually take those four sections of the secret of the Pythagoreans that divide the line, which is phi 1, 1, 1 over phi, and you got this neat little thing over here, without which life is impossible. Yeah, it's this neat little water molecule, and it's the same thing. It's 1, 1, phi with an incommensurable cut of 1 over phi. It's the incommensurable division of the two, which has fractal self-similarity because the entirety of this 108, 36, 36 triangle is miraged right over here. So you have the same triangle over here. The 1 over phi equals phi, and that equals 1, and phi equals 1 over phi. I go on about that forever. That's just fractal self-similarity. And this, discovered by ancient people thousands and thousands of years ago, is the only perfect geometry in the universe, and without which life is utterly impossible. You think that's a coincidence? It's absolutely not a coincidence. The original trinity, the Pythagorean, and certainly much older, is the first principle and attribute, or the first two digits of the Fibonacci sequence, which are 1 and 1. Secondly, of course, the holographic, conjured matter and mass, and lastly, the synthesis between these two pairs, which of course is ontos, or sentient being. The 1, 1, the 2, 3, and lastly 5, which is ontos. Everything outside of 5 is considered evil in excess. That's why in triplicate, 6 and 6 and 6 is considered to be evil, because every ancient metaphysics says evil is excess, excess is evil. This has nothing to do with the Bible, by the way. This is a very, very ancient principle of truth. It's Persian, and who knows how much further back it goes. It probably goes back a whole lot further than that, but without records we certainly don't know. The interlacing fractals of holography mesh between spirit, matter, and water, which is said in the works, the ancient works, the third thing which unites the two. Without this glue, that being water, you can't unite matter and spirit. Nearly perfect radio analogy of mine. Spirit, of course, would be analogous to the signal. The conglomerate of calcium and the rest of the things that make up psychophysicality, of course, would be the radio. The third thing which unites the two, that being the signal, or spirit, and matter, is water. This is the unifier between the two. You got no broadcast or no consciousness without the antenna. The antenna makes everything possible. This is the holographic union, and of course antennas are cut to a harmonic for reception of the signal, such that the radio is made alive. It's nearly a perfect analogy, not totally perfect, but nearly so. Likewise, this glue, which unites matter and spirit, is the only perfect incommensurable geometry, as I said, in the universe, which stands to both logic and reason, and it's the very substance which joins matter and spirit together. This very conjugate term in the fractal self-similarity, or the holographic principle of the universe, which can be seen at basically every level of existence, and also too in the cosmos, both means and implies that these two things are unified, even though they're conventionally distinguished as different from one another and often named differently. The I Ching, the yin and the yang, which these two are actually one. In this case, of course, it means the one as distinguished from the one in attribution, or like unto light and illumination, which of course are a unified conjugate. All of this is holographic, and this bifurcation of one thing, which are still unified. We get the word conjoined, yes? You got two things that are really one thing, but we identify them separately, even though they're one, and they're both tied to one another. In that they're both tied to one another, they manifest as ratio mirages of one another, because the one, of course, is purely subjective. It is not palpable or objective, and everything that we deem as beautiful is necessitatively so objective. But the beauty that we actually see in nature is a palpable, projective, conjugate mirage of that first one, or that principle. And this is the absolute cornerstone of emanationism. It's the basis of all holography in nature. All of it, including dreams, including the mind, including magnetism, including water. All of it, space itself. Of course, space itself is not something at all. The very term conjugate, or as in conjoined, both means and implies these two things are unified, even though they're conventionally distinguished differently, as I just said. Consciousness itself requires this holographic molecule, that of water, whose very geometry is the only perfect incommensurable geometry in the universe, this 115 geometry. You know, the living holography of the system of water, without which consciousness is impossible. This constructive and destructive interference of the holography that we have in dreams is due to, it's like, well, what's the bifurcated principle? in the case of dreams or of mental objects, because anybody can have their eyes open or closed, and we could build things or take things apart or see people and see things. We don't have to be dreaming to have that type of holography. Is the constructive, and you won't read this in any book or see this in any video, is the constructive and destructive interference between the nous, which would be the principle, and that of consciousness. Nous analogously would be the signal, and consciousness is the consubstantiality between matter and spirit, which would be analogous to the broadcast. Everywhere there's absence and presence, we actually have the broadcast. And this, of course, we can listen. Of course, this is just audio, it's not visual. But everywhere there's silence, it's destructive interference, and everywhere there's presence, where there's actually a broadcast out of the speaker, it'd be constructive interference. We hear words, we hear music that conjures things in our heads, ideas, shapes, forms, countless millions and billions of things, and of course dreams are no different than this. This is the holography between the nous and that of existential consciousness. The 3D holography, seen underneath the supercell, these are real pictures I took of the magnetic field underneath the supercell, and of course to hold one in your hands is really quite amazing. When you see it in a video, you're just looking at a two-dimensional representation, but you could tell it's holographic. Everywhere you see light, you see constructive magnetism. Everywhere you see the absence of light, you actually see the dielectric. And they destroy and support each other, constructive, destructive interference, and we have the holography that defines it. Magnetism, of course, is the toroidal field, but this video is not about magnetism. God knows I've made enough videos about magnetism. I won't want you to think that, obviously so. But this constructive and destructive interference pattern is the true hologram. It's 100% identical to the constructive and destructive interference pattern of water. Same interference pattern seen in dreams between the nous and consciousness, and quite literally the simplex answer to the nature of dreams. And people love to talk about dreams, but I don't ever hear anybody talking about the how and the why of these. Are so holographic. We're in our dreams, we're walking around talking, we see hills and things and shapes, and it is undeniably holographic. There's nobody that would deny that, and yet people want to talk about dreams, but I've never heard anybody, why are dreams, let's not talk about why dreams? Why are they holographic? Why are they so palpably amazing? I'm walking around and smelling and seeing things dimensionally in this dream state. All holography in the universe, whether it be dreams, water, the one and the one, the conjugate unified pair, and everything is projective, and all these projective geometries are a conjoined, unified, yet seemingly so bifurcated. Holos is a Greek word. It means many things which are actually one thing, in this case two things. But the constructive and destructive interference between these two things, principle and attribute, magnetic dielectric, consciousness and nous, we have the holographic universe. Space, no different. Space, of course, the shadow of the ether is literally nothing at all, but likewise, too, as shadow is the same. It's not a thing at all, rather the absence of something. Destructive interference between the projective geometry that generates a chasm, which is the absence of the very principle which is declared to be missing, be it the ether, magnetism, or otherwise. Principle, attribute, and chasm. This chasm, of course, is the absence of a principle. It is yet another trinity of the universe. Principle, attribute, and chasm. So we actually have the one and the most simple, or the magnetic and the dielectric, and then we have the absence, the interplay. And that interplay, which we think is something, but it is not anything at all. People think a shadow is something, a shadow is nothing. Shadow is an absence of light. Sure, a shadow is. I can point to it. There's a shadow right over there. It's not something, it's the absence of something. Humanity loves to make declarations or build mountains out of molehills, and make things out of things that are literally nothing at all. By the way, this article that I'm talking about, that I've written for you, the link is below, it's in the description, and it's also, too, a pinned comment. I hope you like it. If you go to my Substack, and it's free, and the Substack will have another link if you want to read it in a PDF format instead of on my Substack. I hope you appreciate it. I've taken a book book's worth of material and put it down into basically 3 pages. I love being able to do that. I don't like reading, like I said, 50 pages to get one nugget of truth out of it. I don't think anybody likes that, unless you have a lot of spare time on your hands and you just like to read for the sake of reading. Some people are like that, amazingly enough. The partner of space, which of course, as Tesla said, has no attributes, is something else that has no ultimate reality, that of course being time. Time and space are not things. Space is the shadow of the ether, and it's the chasm, of course, between the principle and the attribute. Time, of course, has always been said to be the number 4, which of course doesn't exist in the digits of the Fibonacci sequence between 1 through 5. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. The only number missing is a number which every ancient culture said is time. This number, number 4. It's not by coincidence. The ancients actually figured out a lot of really, really deep stuff. When you don't have to pay property taxes and, work 7 days a week like I do, for people these days, you have time to think about the deeper meaning of life. You're able to figure out a lot. You don't have to have computers and complicated equipment. If you focus your mind like a laser, you can penetrate the big secrets of the universe, and that's what the ancients did. Some of them in, of course. The very holography, of course, almost entirely so empty, just like the atom. The volume, I'll completely agree with all academicians. They'll tell you every atom is 99.999% empty space, nothing there. Well, the holography of the volume of the atom is that projective field. This is the magnetodielectric volume, and the volume of every atom measured in picometers, of course, is the projective geometry of the loss of energy or inertia from the nucleus, which manifests this shield bubble, if you will. That's not exactly correct, but you know what I mean, of the projective geometry of the volume of every atom. So. But all of this is unified. Atomic holography, true holography, magnetism, dreams, fractal self-similarity. The fractal of the universe is that 1 over 5 to the power of -3. That long-lost discovery, which I discovered, is the reason why I tattooed it right here on the inside of my wrist, 1 over 5. I could sit there and write a whole book just about that and say, well, that's a fraction, 1 over 5. No, it's a fractal. It's the division of the one as against itself, or the bifurcation of principle and attribute, which is to say holography. This is the reason why dreams are so realistic or holographic. And nobody asked that question, which to me is amazing. This is the reason for the holography seen underneath the supercell of the magnetic field. Well, magnetism is that projective geometry. It's literally the holography, or the bifurcation of the dielectric and loss of energy or inertia that human beings call the magnetic field. The constructive-destructive interference between the two produces holography. The water molecule, the only supremely perfect, incommensurable, and holographic geometry, is the reason why life is even possible. It is the glue which, of course, unites matter and spirit, makes consciousness possible, and the holography of dreams and of thought principles, like we could see a car in our head, we could zoom around a car or whatever, a house, in our head three-dimensionally, turn it on its axis, rotate. Most people could do that in their heads. I don't know if some people can't do that, but I could certainly do it very easily. Anything. It's how I build things and take things apart in my head. Why, well, how does that work? That has nothing to do with the mushy thing between your ears, i.e. the brain. It's the holography of consciousness and nous, as so willed, and this is the only true actual magic in the universe, by the way. The only one. It's the only true magic in the universe. I hope you like the article below, and I hope you get something from it. I made it very pithy, so you have to read it slowly. But this fractal self-similarity means that phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi, and a mathematician might say, well, yeah, that's true, but, so. It's like, this means that phi is the holographic representation of the 1. These are tied at this apex right down here. Everything we call beautiful over here, which is phi, it's the golden ratio, I know what phi is. Like, well, that's descriptively accurate, but you didn't explain what it means. This means everything that we see over here that's objective and beautiful is the holographic projection over here, which is subjective and invisible. You know, wherever I drag this, this remains a constant. This is still 1 and this is still phi. And the multiplicative of which, in three-dimensional representation, or holography, is that which we see and define as beautiful. Someone says, I don't know what beauty is, but I know it when I see it. Which is basically a nice way of saying, I don't know what beauty really is, but, you know, I know it when I see it. Which is how most people operate, and that's perfectly fine. It's better not to know the answer to something than to presume that you do know the answer to it, unfortunately. But holography is very, very important, and everything that's important in this universe is tied to this principle of holographic self-similarity and the projective geometry of same. Explains dreams, atomic volume, explains beauty, explains magnetism, explains emanationism. And man, that's about 95% of the universe. Do they teach this in school or high school? No. You find any books about it? Not really. I got every book on holography, including this one book written by Talbot. He doesn't explain this in his book. I have that book. Called The Holographic Universe. Doesn't explain this. I stuck it in 3 pages. In his hundreds of pages, he doesn't explain this. He didn't understand it, and it's okay you didn't understand it, but I hope you like these videos. I want to say any donations always warmly welcome. I meant to keep this subject as simple as possible, yet still be able to explain it rationally and simply for you. Thank you so much, and have a lovely week. Lux Veritas. Goodbye. By the way, check the link for this article below. Okay? Thank you.